Hello there and welcome to another live chapter reading for Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Today I shall be reading from The Terrifying Love, a Halloween anthology by Serena Nova. His Dancer by Isabella Dunn. She danced with the stars with complete abandonment until her heart burned bright, a supernova waiting to burst. Her light burned brighter than the sun. She danced among the stars with her heart on her sleeve. Until the day she was betrayed by a broken soul. Now she lingers on the dark side of the moon, waiting for him to burn beside her. As the end of time approaches, like an inevitable storm to come and break everything apart, leaving only an empty vacuum, by Hellegard. Chapter 1. Binks. I was running so damn late, but there was no way I was going to be of use to anyone without some coffee. Like usual, I stopped in at my favourite little cafe, grinning when I saw my order already sitting on the counter, a paper bag next to it. "I owe you so big," I called over the counter to Jan as I dropped the 20 to cover my bill. She always got my order right, and today she was a lifesaver. "Kill it today, honey," she called after me as I spun around to dart out of the door. Today was my big audition and I needed to haul off if I was going to make it on time. I shuffled the bag in my arm, ready to push through the door, but found it already being held open for me by a man with sandy brown hair. I beamed at him, thankful for the help. "Thank you so much." He blinked at me wordlessly, staring after me as I rushed down the sidewalk. I could still feel his eyes on my back as I turned back to look at him curiously, chasing away the feeling that pulled in my pit of my stomach as his eyes met mine. The man stood with the door open, scowling when someone else crossed in front of him, and we broke eye contact. It was enough to have me turning back around, my steps quickening towards the opposite end of the street to turn the corner, relief washing through me when I was out of his line of sight. That was weird. Something about him seemed familiar, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Then again, it was a city. People were just weird here. I sipped my coffee and nibbled on my apple as I rushed towards the theatre, knowing that I had to hurry because it was really cutting it close. A few months ago I moved out of my rented first apartment, finally realising I had to get out of that small town if I ever hoped to see my goal of becoming a serious dancer. Not that there was much for me there anyway, unless you counted a drunken father who forgot who I was most nights, not able to keep out of the bottle since my mum passed away. The one time we were able to have a sober conversation, he slipped me a wad of cash, told me to get out before the town sucked me in, go live the dream my mother and I had hoped for. Guilt ate at me as I took the flight, not knowing if I would ever see him again, but I also knew he was right. There was nothing for me there. Not anymore. Not after my mum was gone and my dad following right behind her. The adjustment to my new life had been quicker than I thought. The only thing that was taking time to get used to was the chaos. That and constantly being on the go. I managed to find a job at the little cafe, keeping my rent paid was a priority while I waited for my first chance, and today was it. I had snagged an audition as the lead dancer in a production that was set to run for 3 years. A showcase in this would all but ensure that I had more offers when it ended. For weeks I had been practicing, making sure I knew my choreographed piece inside and out. It had made for long days between working at the cafe, workouts and practice at the studio before going home, to pass out and repeating it all again the next day. This was it though, and this role was going to make it worth every bit of blood, sweat and tears it had taken to get here. A few days prior I had attended a production here, one because I wanted to see it since it had been announced, and two, it was the perfect opportunity to familiarise myself with the stage. I pushed through the large double doors of the theatre, noting the groups of dancers that had just started moving through the foyer into the house, where the seats and stage were. I have just made it. I dropped the remaining coffee and my half-eaten apple into a trash can as I passed through the propped-open doors. Around me, the muffled sound of everyone shuffling in, mixed with excited rumours and barked orders from the crew and directors that sat in front. The stage area was enormous and would be by far the largest one I had ever performed in. The ceiling rose high above us, and the dim light in the seats only serving to highlight the intricate carvings that surrounded us. Centred in the front, though, was the stage. No different to any other, a place to lose myself and let the music take me. Okay, maybe a little different. It was a lot bigger than I remembered. Yikes, I mumbled and heard a small chuckle to my right. Intimidating, isn't it? The man seated next to me as he looked up at the stage with me. He was definitely a dancer, his lean muscled body making that clear, if the tights he was wearing didn't. I let out a breath. Yeah, probably shouldn't have sucked down the apple a few minutes ago, I replied, garnering another laugh from him. I studied his profile for a moment, the smooth face and dark hair that was brushed over his head, getting caught when he turned to look at me. Probably not, his bright green eyes sparkled with humour. I made myself drag my eyes from his and tamp down the instant attraction I felt to him. I had no time for flirting with anyone. I needed to focus on this audition, and then hopefully the years of practice and performing ahead of us. I slipped my flats off and tucked them in the bag, quickly pulling out my pointe shoes. Glad I had taken time to stretch before leaving the house. There was no way I would have had time to do it now, and I wanted to make the best impression possible. Flexing them a few times, I slipped into them, quickly securing the ribbons before setting my bag next to me again. I'm Jay, he said after a moment of quiet. That's nice, I replied, trying again to ignore him and refocus. Now's where you say, Hi Jay, it's nice to meet you, my name is... He trailed off, looking at me hopefully. Hi Jay, I don't know you enough to decide if it's nice to meet you. If I tell you my name, will you leave me alone? I asked. I didn't want to be rude, but I also didn't want to blow the biggest chance I would probably ever get. I stared at him for a minute as he ignored my question, waiting for me to continue. Bianca. My name is Bianca, but almost everyone calls me Binks. There, happy now? Binks, that's different, he answered. It suits you. I nodded and gave him a thin smile, watching the people move around us, wishing now that the last minutes before audition started would hurry up. What role are you auditioning for? He asked quietly, watching the people with me. I looked at him for a moment and seeing only genuine interest, I decided it wouldn't hurt to tell him. After all, he was a guy and there was no way he could even remotely be my competition for the role. Swanhilda. His eyes shot up. Really? Don't act so surprised, I frowned. I was used to being told my whole life my frame was too small, even for that of a ballerina. This time it was going to be different, though. I would show them I might be small, but I was strong. Not surprised, just intrigued, he grinned. Jay, someone bellowed out from the front of the stage. That's my cue. See you up there, Binks. He winked and darted out of the aisle, jogging down to the front, casually stopping next to the people lined up to watch and judge the auditions. Some of the biggest names in the game were here, and I wondered how he could be so laid back with them. One of the most well-known choreographers, Arthur Sannon, took the centre stage and looked around the room at all of us, waiting for the room to be quiet. I quickly dismissed any thoughts of Jay as I waited with everyone else for him to speak. Welcome everyone to auditions for Capellia. We want to make this as quick as possible and as painless as possible. Each of you has been assigned a number. When we call yours, please take the stage and begin as your music starts. You will receive an email with an offer for your role if you have made it within a week. Any questions, please forward them to Stephen by email and he will get back to you. Thank you and good luck. He took his seat and as the first number was called, I let out a breath. Grateful not to be the first, though it did seem they were auditioning for the principal role first. I watched as her music played and she danced flawlessly across the stage, ending within the 3-minute limit given in the instructions. Thank you, a man called out as she rushed to exit the stage. 23, a voice boomed out, and my heart raced as I realised that was my number. Quickly I removed my coat and dropped it into the seat I vacated as I made my way to the stage. I took a deep breath as I stared at the faces that watched, willing my breath to even out. This was it. Classical music drifted in, gentle and quiet as I took my first steps, my body responding to the notes as I had practiced them so many times. Like always, I lost myself in the music, letting my body flow with it through a series of leaps and arabesques, extending my arms, accentuating the feel of love and loss in the notes. My heart went with the music, a song my mother and I had danced to many times, though never quite like this. I closed my eyes as the emotion began to swell in my heart, instead letting it come through in my dance. A quick repetition of steps before I leapt across the stage, spinning into a series of chaînés before I slowed, my feet crossing as the music died around me and faded into nothing. My heart raced, both from excitement and the exertion of the dance. Silence filled the theatre and I dared to look at the panel that stared up at me. The choreographer looked down at his paper and back at me again. I started to exit the stage, but his voice stopped me. "How long have you danced, Bianca Moore?" "As long as I can remember," I answered honestly. "Well done," he replied with a curt nod. As I started to leave the stage again, I noticed Jay sat next to him. He sent me a playful wink before leaning over to hear what the other man was saying. I darted down the stairs and grabbed my coat, eager to leave. There was no point in sticking around, not when they would let us know by email if we got the role or not. I pushed out of the building and bumped into someone, glancing up to give my apology, shocked when I saw the face of the sandy-haired man from the cafe. "I'm so sorry," I muttered, my mind racing at the coincidence of him being here too. My imagination tended to get a little carried away, and I told myself it was not far from the shop. He was probably only passing by. "It's my fault, think nothing of it," he responded, my skin crawling as I realised his clammy hands were still on my bare arms. "Yeah, thanks." I backed away as he continued to stare at me, chills racing across my skin. I had intended to walk home, but decided it was much safer for me to hail a cab. There was less of a chance of him following. I lifted my arm and thankfully a taxi pulled up to the curb right away, making me grateful for once that there was a steady stream of traffic. I got in quickly and shut the door behind me, perhaps a little too hard as the driver looked at me curiously. He asked where I was headed, and as I answered, I glanced in the mirror to see the strange man steadily watching my reflection as we pulled away from the sidewalk. I hope you enjoyed listening to this chapter reading and that you'll go check out the book. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.